Making a movie is so much more than just writing it, shooting it, and releasing it. It's also having faith that audiences will be willing to go along for the ride. And so it's little surprise that filmmakers often find themselves embattled during post-production, as they consider whether a risky scene might be a little too out there for its own good. So with that in mind, I'm Gareth, you are watching What Culture, and here are 10 risky movie moments directors thought they'd lose you. Number 10. The dog's death, John Wick. The instigating incident in the John Wick franchise is the death of the titular assassin's beagle puppy Daisy, who was a parting gift from his late wife Helen. And yet, despite being such a pivotal aspect of the movie, directors Chad Stahelski and David Leitch had to fight hard against the studio to include it, amid fears that a dog's death would place an overwhelming dampener on the action flick's entertainment value. According to writer Derek Kolstad, Lionsgate wanted to cut Daisy out of the film entirely and focus on Wick coming out of retirement. Stahelski, Leitch, and Kolstad fought the studio throughout production, though it wasn't until the film was test screened that the trio knew for sure the scene's inclusion was not a mistake. Kolstad said, "There was this pushback and pushback from all different angles until that first screening. We were watching the audience. As soon as the dog died and seeing their reaction and then seeing the siege in the house, we were like, yep, we were right. Killing off an adorable dog is always a huge risk in any movie, and there was definitely the potential for it to seem emotionally manipulative in a straight-up genre film like this. But thanks to some unexpectedly sensitive direction, it only accentuated Wick's character arc. I mean, Kolstad put it perfectly himself. Without that dog connection, and without that underlying soul and the heartbeat of that character, and also the levity it brings the character and the levity it brings the humor, it was key. John Wick without his poor dead puppy, it just would not be the same. Right, I need some dog positivity after that, so hit me up with your favorite pooch moments in movie history in the comments. Give me a woof. Number 9. Kate's Christmas Story, Gremlins. Though Joe Dante's terrific creature feature is a black comedy through and through, there's a single scene which sticks out as especially grim, when Kate reveals that she hates Christmas because her father died after falling down the family chimney while dressed as Santa. It's by far the darkest moment in the movie, and one that's paradoxically depressing and hilarious. A story so straight-faced and horrifying that the only sane response is to laugh. Dante faced enormous pushback from both Warner Brothers and executive producer Steven Spielberg, who felt that the scene should be removed because its intent was ambiguous. Was it supposed to be upsetting or funny? Dante absolutely knew the scene was incredibly risky in a highly commercial Christmas movie, but also fought hard to ensure its inclusion regardless. In Gremlins DVD commentary, Dante said, "We worked so hard on this scene and tried to make it have just the right touch of pathos and goofiness, and I was really happy with it, and thought this really encapsulates the tone this movie has for me." On the way back to the editing room, the editor turned to me and said, "This will never be in the picture," and it became my quest to make sure it stayed in the picture. Thankfully, Dante got his way and completed his quest, and the film was a stonking commercial success regardless of this 2-minute brick wall of a scene. Number 8. Roman forces a woman to strip, Birds of Prey. Superhero movies go through a far more extensive editorial process than most films, given their generally higher budgets, and the studio's desire to therefore make them appealing to all 4 quadrants of the market. And despite its permissive R rating, Birds of Prey saw director Kathy Hahn battling Warner Brothers to keep the film's most controversial and discomforting scene, one which Hahn herself admitted was risky. The scene in question involved Roman Sionis, aka Black Mask, flying into a rage at his club and taking it out on a laughing woman, Erica, by forcing her to dance on top of a table, before making her friend rip her dress off at knife point. So Hahn said, "I'll be honest, we had to fight to keep that scene because it was uncomfortable. It was risky and we had to fight to keep it at all. There are cuts of the movie without it. I think it's a huge turning point for Roman. It's a huge turning point for Canary. And the way that we shot it was hopefully not about the sexual violence upon the woman. It was more about Roman, what he's capable of, and Canary seeing him for who he really is for the first time. Now she can fully cut herself off from him, and I thought it was a really important scene, so we fought for it. Now, while on one hand you can appreciate the studio's consternation about including a scene of obvious sexual violence in a $100 million blockbuster, it also felt entirely justified contextually, given that the film is wholly concerned with toxic masculinity and feminism. Plus, Ewan McGregor is so damn chilling in the scene that it would have been a crime to leave it on the cutting room floor. Sadly, Birds of Prey ended up tanking at the box office, though its disappointing commercial performance can be assigned to numerous other factors, before even considering the impact of this single scene. Number 7, the ending, Big. Tom Hanks' classic 1988 romantic comedy, Big, follows a young boy, Josh, who makes a wish to become big, and transforms into an adult version of himself overnight. The film is centered around Josh's romance with his eventual co-worker, Susan, which becomes immensely complicated at film's end when Josh makes a wish to become a child again. This obviously brings his and Susan's relationship to an abrupt end, with Josh returning home to his relieved mother, while Susan is left to suddenly ponder a life without Josh, and the baffling moral ambiguity of her romance with him. It's an extremely bittersweet ending for Susan, and one which director Penny Marshall knew very well would risk losing the audience in the final stretch. Nevertheless, she stood firm during discussions with Fox about changing the ending. In her words, at one point the studio wanted her to become young again, but this was the script that the studio bought, and if they were worried about the ending being bittersweet, they should have worried about it a few years earlier. Yeah, fair enough. This was ultimately another example of a smart filmmaker knowing their material better than the studio, and having faith in audiences, as Big went on to gross more than $150 million worldwide, and received 2 Oscar nominations, for Best Actor for Hanks, and Best Original Screenplay. That Hanks is a damn Oscar magnet, isn't he? Number 6, Shaw's C-Section Prometheus. Without question, the most talked about scene in Ridley Scott's Prometheus is the famously gnarly C-section sequence, where Elizabeth Shaw uses an auto-surgery machine to perform a C-section on herself and remove the alien creature ready to burst out of her abdomen. It is an extremely traumatic scene, and according to Scott, single-handedly resulted in the film going from a PG-13 rating to R, which likely explains why Fox expressed their misgivings about the sequence and asked Scott to drop it. He said they didn't even want the scene. It wasn't about just cutting it down, they didn't want the scene. And there's no denying that placing such a visceral scene in the middle of even a sci-fi horror movie was a risk. But Scott thankfully had the backing of Fox CEO Tom Rothman, who agreed to keep the scene largely due to Noomi Rapace's enormous physical commitment to it. She definitely went for it, and man, what a scene. In the end, it ultimately wasn't too squeamish of an inclusion for Alien fans. We've seen a lot over the years, and despite some misgivings about the plot and character logic, Prometheus was a solid critical and commercial success. Just a quick one, thank you very much for checking out this video today, and if you like what you see, then tap that subscribe button below for even more of this brilliant What Culture stuff. Now back to the video. Number 5, Cecilia's Escape, The Invisible Man. Leigh Whannell's terrific reimagining of The Invisible Man opens with a deliciously suspenseful prologue, where Cecilia escapes from her abusive boyfriend Adrian in the middle of the night. What's especially notable about the sequence is that we don't actually see much in the way of abuse from Adrian, beyond him smashing the car window as Cecilia is driven away. This was very much an intentional flourish by Whannell, who wanted to avoid cliched, played-out depictions of domestic abuse. Post-release, Whannell opened up about test screening feedback, which suggested that mainstream audiences wanted to see see more upfront abuse before Cecilia escapes. Yet Winnell ultimately decided to disregard these notes and stick to his instincts. He said, "We did get that note along the way. In test screenings, one thing we would hear was, 'Well, I need to see more.' There almost seemed to be this need or a request for that scene of, 'Let's spend 5 minutes with them before she escapes.' And I just didn't want to write that scene where it's like, 'You call these dishes clean? Whack.' I'm never going to be able to write a scene that will make Adrian as scary as the audience can make him. In my mind, I hope that Cecilia's reactions and the way she was acting told you everything you need to know." And Winnell's instincts were absolutely right here, because though test audiences are often indicative of what the popcorn-munching mainstream will think of a movie, in the case of The Invisible Man, it both enjoyed rave reviews and grossed over $130 million worldwide. Those test audiences aren't always right, you know. And by making the film on a budget of just $7 million, Winnell was able to toss the screening notes out and go with his gut, given that it was practically impossible for the film to bomb commercially. Number 4, Einstein gets sent through time, Back to the Future. Back to the Future is undoubtedly one of the most beloved movies of all time. Yet this was the result of a tremendous amount of reworking during pre-production, principal photography, and post-production. Most of all, that the time machine was originally a fridge, and initial lead Eric Stoltz was recast with Michael J. Fox. But once the film had actually been shot, director Robert Zemeckis found himself concerned that one scene might turn audiences off, when Doc and Marty send Doc's pet sheepdog Einstein a minute into the future in their first successful time travel experiment. In one of the film's early test screenings, audiences weren't told that it was a comedy, and so according to Zemeckis and co-writer Bob Gale, the atmosphere in the screen became incredibly tense as Einstein was being sent through time, with audiences seemingly believing the dog could very well perish. Within that context, it's a totally understandable concern, given that the scene does rather milk the suspense of Einstein's smoky return for every drop it's worth. Yet the scene ultimately ended up playing well on general release, likely thanks to a marketing campaign which aggressively played the comedy card, and ensured audiences knew they were sitting down for a light sci-fi adventure. You know, rather than a David Cronenberg film, that would have been a very different experience. Number 3, The Car Crash, Vanilla Sky. Cameron Crowe's remake of 1997's Open Your Eyes follows David Ames, a man whose life is turned forever upside down after his jealous lover Julie offers him a ride and then intentionally crashes the car, killing herself and severely disfiguring David. On the film's DVD commentary, Crowe confessed that test screenings of the film saw frequent walkouts following this end of first act scene, likely due to the extraordinary mood whiplash of the accident and how aggressively it shifts the rest of the movie's tone from romance to psychological thriller. Crowe was concerned that the shift would be too much for mainstream audiences lured in by A-listers like Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz. And even though the film indeed scored mixed reviews and a dreaded D- cinema score, it still went on to gross over $200 million regardless. So in essence, Crowe was absolutely right about the moment, but he still managed to come out of it with a commercial success on his hands. Phew. Number 2, What's in the Box, Seven. Nobody who has seen David Fincher's Seven will ever forget its nauseating final showdown, where serial killer John Doe delivers a box to Detective Mills containing his pregnant wife's severed head, before Mills guns Doe down in anger. The bleak ending caused a major headache for Fincher, who, along with Brad Pitt, had to fight tooth and nail against New Line Cinema to keep it in the movie. During post-production, the studio felt that either the wife's head should be replaced with a dog's, or Mills' murder of Doe should be cut. And ultimately, Fincher compromised only by adding a vaguely hopeful closing sliver of narration from Detective Somerset. If that wasn't indication enough that Seven was in for a tricky time with the mainstream, the director recounted a test screening which confirmed the sentiment. As Fincher put it, "I'm standing in the back of the theatre, I think I was with Bob Shea, who's the director of New Line Cinema, and these 3 women come by and one of them says to the other 2, 'The people who made that movie should be killed.' Yeah, not a great reaction." Fincher added that the test screening had been sold solely on the presence of Pitt and Morgan Freeman without any additional context. Yet even within the confines of the thriller genre, Seven's ending was a massively grim risk. But in the end, Fincher and Pitt proved New Line wrong, with Seven going on to gross over $320 $25 million worldwide, while today remaining a much-loved classic of its genre. Number 1, Nicole Kidman pees on Zac Efron, The Paperboy. Immediately following its 2012 Cannes premiere, Lee Daniels' crime drama The Paperboy whipped up a storm of controversy due to an infamous sequence in which Charlotte urinates on protagonist Jack after he's stung by a swarm of jellyfish. But Daniels very nearly cut the scene entirely during editing after becoming anxious that it was perhaps one step too far. Daniels said, "I got nervous at the end after we shot it. Right before I sent it off to Cannes, I told Nicole at 3 in the morning, I said, Nicole, I can't do it, I've gone too far. She said, Lee, you made me pee on Zac Efron. If you don't put that in the movie, you're out of your freaking mind." Though The Paperboy went on to receive mixed reviews and tanked at the box office, it has nevertheless endured as a trashy cult classic, and this scene is by far its most memorable. For some though, it may indeed have been the tipping point to turn the movie off. Peeing on stings just is not for everyone.